Welcome back to We Know Scripted TV, where today we know Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 3, Them's the Bricks. My name is Grace, but of course, I'm not alone. It's the Thelma to my Louise, and that's why we got the window down. It's Jess Sterling. Jess, how you doing?
I'm doing incredibly well. I'm so excited to talk about some dream sequences, Grace. Things are getting weird.
Talking about this show. It's a dream, and we're going to talk about dreams, Jess.
Mm-hmm. A lot
Uh,
going on this episode.
you cut my breaks, though? You cut my breaks?
Yeah, I would never do that because it would put me in harm's way as well.
Of course, of
But
course.
them's the breaks.
Um, we had a lot of fun talking about the first two episodes of the season. I felt like okay, really fun to be back in it. And they did a lot. I will say, I feel like this episode, they were like, would everyone like a feast of things to theorize and ponder about? Would you like that? And we were like, yes, please. And this is going to be very fun because they threw about a million things at us.
Yeah, there was a lot going on this episode. I've watched it twice. I have really tried to hone in on these dream sequences and get every single detail down because I do feel like they're extremely important. So I am absolutely thrilled. We got some things right, Grace, that we predicted in the last podcast, which I
Mhm.
was happy to see, and some stuff I never would have saw coming, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
So really, really excited to talk this one through.
Just like Shauna didn't see the children on the playground coming as her brakes were cut and almost hit them. Why didn't she move so much sooner? Just wondering.
Truly, I don't
Just a
know,
little
but I
question.
I did love Misty's shout out of "Grassy knoll,
Yeah,
grassy
grassy knoll.
knoll."
Um, can I tell you though? I don't know that we really need to dive into all of this, Jess. We're going to do it here on We Know Scripted TV, which you should make sure you're subscribed to. You can search WeKnowScriptedTV.com or search We Know Yellowjackets in your podcast app of choice, or you can find us on YouTube. But Jess, I think I solved the whole thing.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's
Please
pretty.
do tell.
You didn't get it from this episode?
No, I'm behind.
Well, they watched Ty and Van are watching TV, and the No-Eyed
Uh-huh.
Man is in a specific commercial.
Yeah, an
The
ice cream
trees are
commercial.
screaming. The whole thing is you scream, we scream, trees scream for ice cream. We just give ice cream to the trees and we'll
Yep.
get to go home. The wilderness provides.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now the thing is are they gonna have to make their here's how they're gonna do it. They gotta find a
No,
cow.
no, hold on. I said we don't have to discuss any further. We figured out just give them ice cream. Fine, we'll go home. We'll be rescued.
Mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
Simple, easy.
Oh, ice cream. We all love ice cream. Um, Okay, I'm excited to chat about this one. I feel like you're right. We said some things last week that I feel like are correct. We said things, a long time ago. I think actually that would now prove to be correct. I feel like we've been on. I was full of surprises. Um, the thing I feel most proud of is coming out of episodes 1 and 2 was feeling like, hey, remember when they were all standing around, they all heard the screams and they all heard it and they're all talking about it. And then this episode I feel like basically reiterates how important that idea is, in the sense that like there's literally a moment where it feels like, is this my dream or your dream? And I feel like that's so perfect for the show, in terms of then being able to talk about it, because we're going to talk about each of their individual moments that they have in their dreams, the ways in which they're all together in the dream. Is that anybody in particular's dream? This is so much fun fodder for us to be chatting about today, Jess.
It really is. I think they also do a great job. I mean, I watched this with like no lights on in my house because there were moments, not Game of Thrones style. I'm not shading Yellow
It
Jackets.
was pretty hard.
It was pretty dark. But they're in a tunnel and there's water and all this stuff is happening, right? And then we see the flame flicker. Suddenly they go from being in what I would deem a very claustrophobic setting of a tiny, tiny tunnel crawling through to suddenly a large opening. And the flame is kind of like flickering. Immediately my mind went to gas because, that makes sense. And there's been a ton of theories, Grace, on what are the tunnels used for? Is it a mining
Mm,
situation, right?
mm,
And what I want to talk through each of these dream sequences.
same.
So let's start with Shauna. I'm going in sequential order as to I think, and maybe I'm not. It doesn't matter. Let's talk
That's
about
okay.
Shauna's dream.
Yeah.
Um, we see her in a white dress, very pure, right? Very demure, very
Very mindful.
mindful,
Mhm,
floating in the water in what I would deem a very religious pose, kind of, cross side, arms
mhm,
out, Jesus
mhm,
like.
mhm.
And she's in the water. What looks to be, I assume, in the water that is in the wilderness that they're currently in, that they've swam in this water before. It looks kind of like it. Maybe not.
Okay, I'm about to say something that's gonna be so embarrassing as people who are covering Yellow Jackets, but I
Mhm.
think might be I can't tell if this happened in Yellow Jackets or in another show we watched, The Wilds, and I
Yeah.
can't remember where they find a lake, and I think it might be The
Well, it
Wilds and not
happened in
Yellow
this
Jackets.
show. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They
Okay,
found a lake and they go
okay,
swimming.
and then
Yeah.
that's where they see the cabin, so I think this is just that, I
Right.
guess,
I think it's that same water. It doesn't
it
matter.
doesn't really matter, it's a
Um,
dream. Yeah, it doesn't really
yeah.
matter.
So there's a little boy yelling, "Mommy, mommy." And this boy, again, apologies, I'm not a kid person. This kid looks to be about 4.
I would say that. Yep,
Woo!
4.
Nailed it.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
Yelling out, "Mommy." Shauna tries to swim to him and she moves absolutely nowhere. She is stuck in this one spot in the water. Grace, tons of obviously water is like a very commonly used theme tool in a lot of television and media as
Uh-huh.
like a symbol of something, right? Similarly, it is used in Yellow Jackets in that way. We've seen Lottie be baptized, right? We've seen
Mhm.
her crawling through a similarly kind of dark hatch, getting to a bunch of candles. Water is very often used on this show. So,
Mhm.
with the end of Shauna's dream being that she is being pulled underwater closer to the core of this land, what did you take away from this dream that Shauna has?
So, yeah, so the fact that I mean, I think the obvious place to start is, like, there's a little boy on the shore. She is clearly not over, as we saw in, the last few episodes, obviously losing her baby, um, and so that feels like that makes a ton of sense, but it's the fact that she can't get to, um, the baby. Obviously, she won't be able to get to the baby, and then, yeah, water being cleansing. I definitely think the religious stuff makes sense in terms of like, I think I don't know about you, but my most commonly held belief is that Shauna still ends up being like the antler queen when the antler queen stuff matters. That's basically my like
Mhm.
big bet of the show
Yep.
is that I think Shauna being the most sort of reluctant to let anybody know what happened out there, and also the fact that just the way she acts feels to me like there's obviously a lot that she feels personally ashamed by in a way that doesn't totally match up with like how she's been acting up until this point, which is that like Jackie died. I mean, like, part of that Jackie leaving and going outside certainly feels like Shauna could feel guilt, but it doesn't feel the same as like intentionally murdering someone. And certainly the thing with her baby doesn't feel like something that like I I think the reaction to feel ashamed about what happens would be fair, and I feel bad for Shauna, but that's not the sense that I get in terms of like what she's trying to repress, basically. And so I think she's like really at the center of this whole thing
Mhm.
in my mind. Yeah.
I agree. I think obviously Shauna a main character, a main player in this entire thing since the first season, but she's never felt more important to it and the wilderness in my opinion than she does right now.
Mhm.
Certainly water is often viewed as like this cleansing thing. We talked a lot in succession about the importance
Mhm.
of water, specifically
Mhm.
drowning in water is like a very big thing in that show.
Mhm.
And yeah, I didn't quite know what to make of it. The one like the honestly my biggest takeaway from this entire dream sequence was I have never seen Shauna look happier than
Mhm.
she did when waving to that little boy on the shore. Like
Yeah.
that is the happiest we have ever seen Shauna.
Yep.
And I don't know what to make of that. Whether it's is this dream somewhat cleansing for her in terms of the grieving process, in terms of what she's going through, being the only person out there who's going through this specific thing of losing a child. Um, yeah, it was fascinating. It was heartbreaking watching her just swim in place as hard as she's trying to swim. She's not moving at all. That also feels I don't know if there's a connection between that and the grieving process of no matter how hard you try to move, you feel like you are just being pulled underwater. You feel like the grief is all consuming. Maybe it's as simple as that, but certainly a very interesting dream, especially again the white dress that Shauna is wearing, I couldn't help but notice the similarities to it and the nightgown Laura Lee originally was wearing that we
Mm,
also see Pit Girl wearing in the very first scene of the
mm.
episode. You can't help but notice the similarities there as well.
I think for me, I think that like the way I view these dream sequences are things that essentially, and I'll get to whether or not I believe the wilderness to be a supernatural force or not, but essentially it's what the wilderness is trying to tell these what message does it want to send to these folks. And I feel like the way in which, like, if I don't believe the wilderness is a real thing, it's basically what do these folks think, like subconsciously, what is the wilderness trying to tell them? So I
Right.
view it all in the lens of like, this is not in terms of like not being able to grieve. I don't think I see it in that way. I think I see it as like the wilderness trying to give Shauna a message of, you want, like, it was a sacrifice of that the wilderness made. I think my interpretation of this is that Shauna is sort of the most chosen of all the chosen. I think she will be the antler queen that is, whatever, again, we talked last time about whatever the worst thing that this group does. I think it feels hard to not think that Shauna is at the center of that she's literally probably the antler queen in the shot that we've, of the antler queen that we saw in the show, in the first episode, sorry. And that she's in sort of a religious, a Christ-like thing when we see her in a cleansing bottle of water, and then the water sort of pulls her down, and it is in it. It's almost this message of like, this is what you need to be doing. Like, this is your purpose,
Yeah.
not that. That's how I interpret the Shauna dream sequence of it all. Although I will say it's very interesting because I think that there definitely is something to what's going to happen when it's the three of them, kind of five of them, a little bit later.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Akila's dream. She's walking through the woods, eating a bunch of like very ripe, delicious looking berries.
Yeah.
She comes across a bunch of farm animals behind a white picket fence, similar to their own camp, but many more animals.
Hmm.
And she hears a man's voice saying, "Careful, they bite." And it turns out it's a talking llama. Um,
Yeah. Obviously. Obviously.
obviously. And it says, "Everything bites, it will defend itself. They're calling you." And then it says, "It can be easy or it can be hard. But either way, it's gonna get what it wants." That is when the trees start to do their screaming, shrieking, whatever you want to call it. The ground begins to pull her under, very similarly to how Shauna gets pulled underwater. This is fascinating. All of this comes at the point in the episode where Lottie has approached Akila about it needs you. It wants to
Hmm.
talk to you. You need to
Hmm.
give into it. Or do you really not believe in it at this point?
Hmm.
Akila has been very resistant to this the it of the wilderness, right? Calling to her. This feels like the wilderness out and out talking to her Grace and saying, "Listen, we're either going to do this the hard way or the easy way. You might as well give in."
Yeah, again, I definitely feel the sense of like, this is either legitimately the wilderness, the supernatural force, telling her this, or this is what Akila thinks the wilderness would be saying to her. Again, I do think you have to take all of these as nightmares. Like, I think these are all, none of these certainly are pleasant experiences. So eating the ton of berries, that's one I definitely want to dive into more, because I feel like there has to be more to, like, I think like with Shauna we get water, with Van we're going to get fire. Those to me feel a little more obvious
Air.
than berries and farm animals. And then a talking llama is just, it's the most, I cannot wait to see how people are reacting to this, as we're recording pretty soon after we've watched. This is pretty wild. To me, there's almost a lot more in Akila in the last sort of sequence than this one. I feel
When
like
they're all
this one
together, you're talking about, yeah.
I'm having a tough time parsing all of this. Like, basically, I would just be reiterating what you said. I think we probably need to look into like berries, animals, and llamas specifically. The messaging is really clear, I think, from the llama.
Mhm.
And being pulled in is so similar to, I mean, all three of them have moments of being pulled. One by water, one by the trees, and
Ah,
Van is being pulled by the like being stuck in that
The
seat
chair, the
in the chair,
airplane
the arms around
seat,
her
yeah.
thing. So they're all having a very similar, there is all of this like, this is where you need to be, like as much as you want to resist it, this is where you're supposed to be, etc., etc. I'm just having a little bit of the toughest time with like Akila and the metaphors
So
of what she saw.
I did Google what do llamas mean specifically in dreams,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently they are known for their endurance, navigating tough terrains, and apparently llamas in dreams symbolize an individual's journey or challenges. Now, that's really vague, but if we want to read into it, we could say Akila is certainly going through a journey. I mean, the last 12 months have been challenging, but a specific journey involving it or the wilderness. And her connection to it, if we really are trying to read into that. But I definitely will have more to say when we get to the three of them together in the classroom.
Well, I guess I mean you could do this thing of berries, water, fire, all have there is there's a cleansing, there's a nurturing, there is a like, like like burning it with fire, the idea of like sort of like ridding yourself of that. They all have this thing, which I think these scenes are all tied up in a like, you have to forget what you sort of like, you for your preconceived notions of what it like, that doing all of this is wrong. And I mean, doing this means killing and eating your friends, like this is really what we're talking in terms of like what the wilderness is like, quote unquote, asking for. um I think you could play into all of those as being, they're all cleansing to a degree,
Yeah.
just of different like natural forms of that.
Right.
But let's
Especially
go to,
because,
yeah. Mhm.
especially like as you're saying, right? Like Shauna's being pulled under the water, Akila's being pulled into the earth, Van is being consumed by fire. And
and and being being forced to stay in that place
right.
as well. Yeah.
Um, yes, to Van's dream, she is the sole person left in the cave at first. She
Hmm.
sees a door in front of her that leads to what appears to be the cabin. She sits down in a rocking chair in front of the fire. Some of the visual cues used are like flames kind of up on her face. Again,
Hmm.
this is now the third time that Van and fire specifically have been shown together on the show. The first time being her trying to get out of the plane when it first crashes and almost
Hmm.
being caught on fire. And then obviously when the girls that think that she is dead after the wolf attack, they put her on a pyre of fire.
Hmm.
Um, and then we see the rocking chair turns into an airplane seat. She is belted in, and these arms are kind of reaching around and holding her in place. She's trying to get out. She eventually is able to get out of the seat, tries to leave through the door, and it is locked.
Hmm.
Um, Grace, obviously, the first thing on my mind was like, what if what
Hmm.
if Van is cabin guy somehow?
So yeah, um maybe. I mean, I think you have to get into time travel then, and
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, the show is obviously playing with time, but I don't know that we're playing with time travel, and I will not say that it's a step too far, but it's like a little out there based on what we've seen. I think like to like sort of build on what you're saying, I think something I've talked a lot about, like who else is out there, who else has been out there, that sort of thing. I'm wondering whether or not the thing that I started to think about when you said, is she cabin guy, is not, is she cabin guy, but is she the next iteration of cabin guy, in the sense of like not reincarnation, but more like this, like the wilderness brings people to this place and people play specific roles, and there is a role that the previous cabin guy played that is similar to Van's role of, ultimately she goes and sits in the rocking chair, like we found the skeleton, when they initially find this cabin, and sort of the wilderness having a plan, having people have gone through things like this before, and people, they're being like a Lottie adjacent, they're being unfortunately a Jackie adjacent, being a Shauna adjacent, and Van being, this version of Van would have been cabin guy. That to me feels a little bit more, likely than literally Van is cabin guy. But that's,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, the reason I bring it up is fire often is seen as kind of this
Rebirth, reincarnation.
transformative
Yeah.
item. a thing,
A
and it's
phoenix rising from the ashes.
exactly. And we have just seen Van involved in so many things with fire, and we're obviously going to get into her present day storyline, and kind of transformation and rebirth and all of that. But it was just something that was in my mind in seeing her sit in fire, you know? Um, but yeah, then we get all three of them are now in a classroom together in their soccer uniforms. And Lottie is the teacher. Young Lottie is the teacher. She has
Mhm.
written on the chalkboard, of all the ways to lose a person, death is the kindest. And the no-eyed man is wheeling a projector cart by, which is again gonna point out Taissa is nowhere in this scene. So that is
Mhm.
peculiar. Oh my god. Peculiar.
Peculiar.
Thank you.
It's peculiar. Definitely, it's peculiar that you can't
It's
pronounce
peculiar.
peculiar. Mhm.
Jackie is also there. Love to see Ella Purnell. So happy she's
Yeah, I
back.
was very happy for that.
She hands over a slap bracelet that has the symbol on
So
it.
90s.
So
So 90s.
90s. And Van puts it on her arm, and when she does it, it cuts her arm.
Yeah.
And there Jackie says, "Oh, you're just being a big baby. It's just a cut." And then Jackie slaps it around Shauna's neck, and suddenly Shauna is bleeding from her neck, and Lottie is saying, you have to help her or she will die. We'll all die," as Akila is like struggling to get this slap bracelet off of Shauna's neck.
Yeah. So again, I go back to like the roles of it all. Like they're playing these distinct roles, like Lottie being the teacher, Akila being in this scenario a person who's unaffected by like what's happening. Like she doesn't get cut, she doesn't get it wrapped around her
Exactly.
throat. Van, it's interesting. I do think in terms of like the ways in which, and even the way Van is in danger throughout the show, like all of these moments where she's on the verge of death. And we can talk about present day Van in terms of the way she was, had terminal cancer that seemingly is now in remission, is of this person who is close to death but doesn't meet death, right? Like and so
She's
the
always
cut.
it's always hovering around her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cut on her arm is like she's hurt and affected by what's happening, but not in the same way that then like when it goes around Shauna's neck, it does. The piece for me that I go back to is I think that in this scenario, Shauna once again gets sort of put in what I would say is the most like Christ-like version of this weird horror movie that we're in, where um you know uh, I'm not religious, but Christ was persecuted for his sins. If we talk about the way that she's lying in the water, so then in this scenario where she's the one who actually is like the one who needs to be saved, or argue like, I'm wondering whether or not we get some version of like if Shauna like dies but comes back to life in this shit, like more so even than Van. I feel like I feel like there's some argument to be made about evidence leading towards that. Once again, as Shauna as like it does feel like in this scenario, like, oh, is Akila the chosen one? But I actually think in this scenario, I
Right,
still
because
I still think Shauna's the chosen, like the
no, and I
chosen
think
one.
that tracks with the dream because Akila's job is to help Shauna.
And if
And
she dies, we all
Shauna,
die.
exactly,
Yeah.
Shauna is the key to us living. You have to help her or we will all die.
Yeah.
So Akila is the key, Akila,
Oh
to
wow.
helping Shauna rise to power, essentially. I also just one thing to point out before they even get into this whole dream sequence when they're climbing through the really small tunnel, the wet tunnel.
Yeah.
Van yells out, "This can't be the right way. Like this
Right.
can't be the way." And again, yeah, I'm thinking of it in a more broad sense of this can't be the way this goes. This can't be the way this happens.
You shouldn't say
Um,
Broadway. They're women. They're just
there,
you call
sorry,
them
all
women.
the women, yes, all the
Yeah.
young women.
Of the women way.
Um,
Yeah.
and and Shauna is the one that pushes them
Hmm.
to keep moving, to keep going.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, obviously me being the logical thinker is like, why aren't you walking back and being like, "Hey Mari, did you have to climb through like a really
Mm.
wet
Mm.
tiny tunnel to get
Hmm.
on your really messed up knee to get through here?" But it's just it's really fascinating. I think there's going to be a lot of people poring over these stream sequences.
100%.
trying to parse out exactly what they mean. But I think at the very least, Grace, we can all agree that Shauna is of the utmost importance and Akila is involved in helping in some way. And Van is always in close proximity to death, danger, harm, however you want to phrase it.
Agreed with that. All right, let's like I feel like sort of pulling back out. Maybe we go visit some of these characters just to stick with them in terms of their sort of modern day story. And I think
Mm-hmm.
probably we can stick with Shauna. Um Shauna and Misty do go for a little ride. The brakes get cut. This feels like full on, if we're gonna just
Well,
keep saying
the
Hillary
breaks
Swank.
don't work. We don't
Right.
know if they've been cut. I will say Shauna's van has suffered some prior injuries. It's
True.
gotten in a couple accidents.
It's true.
I think at the very least, I'm willing to put my money down and say there's no way Misty was the one who
Oh,
sabotaged the van.
well, I think no, the wolves sabotaged the van. Okay,
Very
hold
close
on.
off.
Wait, okay, wait, hold on. Okay, going back.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm fully in your camp now of like what we're building to in the storyline with Misty is like the way Shauna is so immediately like, why did you do that? Is so rude. I know that she just like almost ran over a playground full of children, but Misty, I would agree, likely doesn't put herself in harm's way in this scenario. And the fact that Shauna does think she is, I think just is fueling the storyline of Misty not really having true friends and wanting to unfortunately live in a world where her and the Yellowjackets are besties. And I think this is just further proof that Misty is not quite seeing the truth behind how her friends feel about her.
Certainly, Shauna is not the one to suffer fools. I think is the
Yeah.
biggest
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
is Shauna Shauna doesn't have a bleeding heart and doesn't have the patience for anything Misty that she sees right through Misty and she instead of brushing it aside and not mentioning it and pretending like Misty actually did have a meeting get canceled, right? Shauna calls all of it out. Every single last thing she calls out
Hmm.
and calls her a verified psycho.
Uh-huh.
She also accuses Misty of leaving the phone in the bathroom, which we get to see Misty's reaction to that. I would argue that it definitely wasn't Misty who did that because it doesn't seem like she has any sort
No,
of
it's Hillary Swank.
it has to be Hillary Swank. But yeah, I think it's interesting again that we are setting up we have the Misty and Shauna, which feels like the new Nat and Misty or the new Walter and Misty, right? This is our pair. And then in the past, we also have Shauna and Misty connecting over the Coach Ben of it all. So
Well, can I just also say Shauna
yeah.
is so friggin' rude to Melissa in when she goes,
Oh, of course.
you better not be boring. But then you just made out with her. What the hell are you do? What are you talking about? Shauna's so rude. Shauna's rude.
And Shauna's going through it. Yeah, Shauna has no patience for absolutely anybody at this point.
Misty
And
doesn't have any patience because he's playing hooky.
yes, Misty is playing hooky from work. She's trying to spend time with Shauna. And she even says, "Oh, I thought it would be nice for us to catch up." Shauna is too preoccupied with the 70,000 other things going on in her life. She's trying to make things better with Jeff by buying gift baskets for the men that they had a business meeting with the night before. She's trying to keep Lottie away from Callie. She needs to figure out what Callie has even learned from Lottie. You know, she's trying to parent Callie, who is certainly going off the deep end. So there's a lot going on in Shauna's life, and I think she just frankly has had it up to here and doesn't want to deal with Misty's nonsense. And
But it's
yeah,
not
then
Misty. It's Hillary Swank. So
it's Hillary
just
Swank and
relax, Shauna.
it's Lottie, Grace, because when she
Yeah.
gets home
Hmm.
to Lottie and Callie cooking in the kitchen after a fun little escapade of shoplifting, which we already knew Lottie did, and I
Yeah.
loved them bringing
Yep.
this back.
Yep. It's great.
Um, the she sees Callie wearing Jackie's necklace. The necklace that we know is
Hmm.
put on girls before they hunt them down and sacrifice them to the wilderness.
Too far, Lottie. Too much.
It feels right,
Yeah.
Shauna. Don't you feel it too?
Yeah. Shauna says it never meant what you thought it meant.
No, no, that's Lottie
Oh,
that says
sorry.
that.
Sorry. That's what I meant.
Lottie,
Yeah.
because
Sorry.
Lottie is saying it doesn't mean we're going to sacrifice Callie.
Right.
Like, in
Right.
my opinion, Lottie is saying this as like, oh, she's chosen. She is like
Right.
a chosen one. And in Shauna's mind, no, that's the necklace we put on girls before we killed them and
But
ate them, and you put it on my daughter.
or but or uh Shauna does know it's that, but being the chosen one means you do all the worst things. And so like you lead the group through doing, I mean, basically what we've seen from the first episode of the show is you kill someone, you chase someone, you kill them, and you eat them. And so either things can be true. Either putting the necklace on somebody means that they're going to die, or what I think like Shauna really like, if we're going to like think about, like I talked about this last week, of like what's the end game here, what's the like conclusion we're moving towards in the present day, which is that I think these people have to be like, not, they don't have to be okay with what they did, but they have to, like, I think in Shauna's case, you can't put it in a box in your
You
closet
have to
and forget
process
about it. You
it.
have to process it. And I think that if the necklace meant like you're the chosen one, if Shauna even knows that, and but in my assumption Shauna was the chosen one, what being the chosen one means is leading other people to do some of the worst things you can imagine. And that's also a bad outcome in terms of like what that means for Callie.
Well, she never wanted Callie to have to deal
Right.
with this kind of generational trauma to begin with. She didn't ever want
Right.
Callie involved in this.
Right.
And now she is, right? Shauna says, how did you even get that? Where even was that necklace? How do you even have it?
Yep.
And on top of that, I am loving that it feels like we are at peak Shauna anger in both timelines, right? We have Shauna in the past dealing with the fallout of losing her best friend and losing her baby and kind of the rage that she feels about that. And then we have Shauna in present day just being so completely out of control at this point and
Yeah.
everything kind of catching on fire simultaneously, trying to parent her daughter and keep her daughter out of everything she's been through. And yet, seemingly, Callie just keeps getting drawn back in, this time through Lottie. Shauna's screaming at Lottie to get out of my house. And then she rips the necklace off of Callie's neck and shoves everything off of the counter. Intense, incredible
Yeah.
acting by Melanie Linsky,
Yeah.
obviously, a legend. But I'm loving this because it feels like, Grace, that we are about to see Shauna in the past do some stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it feels like Shauna of the present hasn't processed any of that. And it is starting to come to a head.
And you know what help her calm down? Ice cream. Okay. I agree. And I just want to credit the show. I do think that they are doing a very good job, I think, of balancing the stories between the 90s and the present day in a way where we're not seeing the exact same content, but we're getting enough of each to really help inform the other. I think that knowing Shauna in the present day helps us sort of like literally, I think, like for me, be worried about what Shauna in the 90s is capable of and what she's going to do. And then the version of the 90s Shauna who is dealing with having lost Jackie and having lost her baby, and now being sort of like, whether or not this is her dream or Akila's dream, like there's at least some version of like, you must be saved or else. And I just think it's all like really balanced effectively, and really coherently, in a way that I just want to give props to the show, because I don't think that's like an easy thing to do. This to me feels like, I know people talked about season 2 maybe being a step down from the show. I'm feeling so far through 3 episodes that this is just one of the elite shows on television. So,
Absolutely. I am in a
yeah.
full agreement. And I
Yeah.
think the repercussions of what's going on with present day Shauna and how it's going to affect Callie is really fascinating because
Yeah.
Callie wants to know more. And I think the way I view it, at least, is the reason she wants to know more is because she feels like she is so disconnected from Shauna, from her own mother. And that is not by design, but Shauna has always, we had learned last season, she's always kept Jeff and Callie at arm's length
Yeah.
because of everything she suffered through in the wilderness and losing her baby. And now I feel like those chickens have come home to roost in a way because Callie
The
wants
chickens are
to,
with the sheep, I think. I'm
with
just, yeah,
Akila, she's
with
taking
Akila.
care of them. And Callie wants to know more about Shauna, whether or not Shauna wants her to. And so she is going to find a way, whether that's talking to Lottie, talking to Misty. And Lottie is dangerous, right? Like, she just helped a teenage girl shoplift a $1,500 dress. Not that that's the worst thing in the world, but it's not great. So this is also fascinating, and I'm loving it. I have never been more invested in the Shauna family dynamic than I have currently, because
Yeah.
the Adam stuff, I've ranted about it enough. Like, I it wasn't my favorite. I felt like it
How dare you invoke his name on this podcast?
it took up too much time. I thought, when we had so much other interesting things going on, but this and the
What?
family drama, especially because Callie is the only. Sammy's not really on the show right now, and he was too young to really, in my opinion, make a huge impact. Callie is the only next generation that we have from the Yellow Jackets, and so seeing how she is
Hmm.
picking up on things is fascinating.
I think the thing too that's really strong about this is you talked about that we've never seen Shauna as happy as when she sees her seemingly her son. And what's really tragic about that is that she does have a daughter who she is really struggling to connect with. And so thinking about that being this thing that would have brought her immense joy, but because of everything that happened, it's basically made it impossible for her to sort of like at the moment to be able to fulfill what she sees as a thing that she would love to be, which is a mom. Is like just super sad. That's super
Yeah.
sad and dark.
Well,
So
and
yeah,
it's Misty even literally says it this episode, like, the apple doesn't fall far from the
yeah,
tree, which is, I'm sure, the last thing Shauna wants to hear. I'm sure she
yeah.
doesn't want Callie to be like her at all.
Uh,
And the only other time, Grace, I would say that I've seen Shauna as happy was when her and Callie were bonding over Callie throwing
it's
guts
true.
at
It's
the
true.
girls in high school.
Yeah, I mean, it said I'm not a parent, obviously, and my brother, I have nieces, and I do think this thing of even I feel it sometimes as an aunt rather than the parent. And I know that's not the same, like, just to like really clarify it, of like that's not the same role, but this feeling of like not wanting to mess things up for
Certainly.
these children is just like I can imagine how I feel, and then can like I can't even really think, but I know it must be like multiple times more, more pressure on parents to feel like that responsibility. And I feel like the way Shauna both this thing of wanting your children to be, you know, not have the same things that happen to you happen to them, and to be arguably like better people than you, like a better person than you are, as in many ways like that. I feel like the show is doing a really really good job, especially sort of like I think sort of pulling things back from, which I think we agree on, you and I, Jess, and probably many of our listeners, of like the weakest storyline of the show, which is the
Yeah.
like adult storyline relating to Shauna. um Okay, let's chat a little bit. Well, we're in the present day. Let's just stick here, and then we'll sort of go back to the 90s to talk about Ben and Mari. But let's stick with Van and Taissa, and the fact that we get the news that Van's cancer is officially in remission. And it seems like, according to Ty, that man had a heart attack so that Van could be saved.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think it seems like, whereas in the 90s timeline, Van was the one who was very quick to side with the Lottie man of faith argument, woman of faith argument. Um, in the present day, it seems like Ty is the first to be like, it is happening again. This is what happened. It is that man died of a heart attack so you could live. And I would argue, Grace, and I don't know if you feel differently, that the moment that Van hears from Ty that it was the waiter died, and that's the reason that she is now going to live, that Ty is not Ty. Ty is other Ty. Ty is Issa. She
Right.
changes. She lights a candle and she starts chanting, "We hear the wilderness and it hears us."
Yeah,
And we
that's
know they
right.
did this last season.
Yep.
Um, I don't know. Did you read that the same way, that that was Ty's altar?
I didn't, but it's very smart, and so that's why we do this pod together. because you catch things that I wouldn't. It's very smart. It makes a lot of sense.
It's always in her eyes. I've always noticed that's where the shift
Right,
happens, you
right.
know? I don't know, and
Uh,
I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong, but there's also this look that Van gets, like,
mhm.
"Oh, this is what I'm dealing with now," because Ty fully buys in to this, that's what's happening. She's happy, like, she's like, "This must be what's going on." They're
Yeah.
watching an old movie, and this is when and I thought, Grace, I thought this was, Ty seeing things because 'cause they're watching an old VHS tape,
Yeah, I thought
and
so too, but she's supposed like Van suppose I was going to be until we saw the No-Eyed Man show back up at the end of the episode. I do have to say, I think that there's two things in this episode that I'm not fully, as much as I'm complimenting the show, as much as I'm saying I think this is, incredible television. There are two things on the board that I will say at the moment I'm like a little like, oh, if that's like if we're doing this, I'm a little like, I'm gonna just like kind of put that over here. One is the llama. I just have to candidly say, talking llama does not feel to me as there is a there's there's a tone to the show that Talking Llama I think so far has not fit into the
interesting, okay.
bucket of the that's my feeling. I
It's
feel
fair.
like the show has been very funny. It's very, and I feel like, even in this episode, I think it's incredibly funny. It's not it has not felt Talking Llama funny to me. It's okay, it's in there. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's a little tone altering for me. The other one was going to be if we found out that the No-Eyed Man is entirely a creation of Taissa and her grandmother having watched a television show with a commercial where there's the no-eyed man, the man with the with basically Looney Tunes eyes coming out of his face, and
Yeah.
they've basically incepted, haunting visions of them. That to me is I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, if that's the answer, and
But
then
Grace, if
I
that's the case, then why did we see the no-eyed man
no, that's what I'm
in the
saying.
vision with the girls? Like, I
No,
don't.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I am fully saying that like I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I was like a little worried that it was like, oh, this guy. But once they start going to the ice cream part, like they go to the store and then we see the no-eyed man in the dream, I'm like, okay. But there was a moment of me being like, oh, if that's like the answer we got, I'm like, it's fine, but it's not quite like what I thought it would be. But I
It's
don't
really
think it's what.
fair.
Yeah. Mhm.
I agree with you that when we saw the no-eyed man on a commercial with his eyes popping out of his head, and Van saw it too, I was
Yeah.
like, "What are we doing?" But
Yeah.
then or excuse me, Ty is very insistent. We need to go to Ozzy's homemade ice cream parlor right
Yeah.
now, even though
Yeah.
it's permanently shut down and the building is locked. She
Yeah.
breaks into it. Van is like, "What are we doing here?" And when they get inside, they see what looks to be a coyote, maybe it's a wolf-like
I think it's okay.
approximation.
Nah, that's a coyote.
Yeah,
That's
with a
or
rabbit in its mouth.
uh,
Yes.
could it have been a fox? Could it have been a fox?
I think that was, if it was a fox, they would have made it red to make that obvious, no?
Um,
It looked like a coyote to me. But either
let
way,
me let me just yeah.
if we equate a coyote to a wolf, because there's a lot of wolf imagery on the show, Taissa has seen a lot of wolves that weren't there. This time, Van sees it too, so we can assume that it's real. And it's holding a dead rabbit in its mouth. Rabbits, if anyone listened to us cover season 1 on post show recaps, you know I was obsessed with the amount of rabbit imagery. I often associate rabbits with Jackie. It is Jackie's mother who gives Shauna little rabbit figurines all the time for Jackie's, birthdays that have passed. And Van says to Taissa, "We know what it wants. It wants more." So, yikes.
Mhm. I was just trying to see if I could catch a glimpse of the animal. I think I initially was thinking coyote, but I might have then thought fox. So let me
It
just
has ears like a fox, but coyotes have ears like foxes.
um I have seen both coyotes and foxes in my neighborhood, and so I feel like let
Oh.
me,
Okay, so if it's
but
a fox, well, I guess we'll have to think about it differently, but I was equating it to be a coyote because coyotes and wolves feel like similar enough creatures in terms of like pack animals, prey driven sort of things. Um but yeah, this is getting very strange in the current timeline
I
with
think if you
Van.
look at it again, just
It
I
looks like a
mean,
fox.
I think it's kind of. I mean, it could be either, but my first instinct is like that's a fox. But
Okay.
It's kind of
Maybe?
orangey, but like I don't know. But then I'm thinking, okay, like fox symbolism versus coyote symbolism. They do
Mhm.
they do tend to represent pretty similar things in terms of like trickiness, cunning, adaptability, intelligence. They do sort of hold a similar.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Grace, the rabbit that the animal is holding is pure white. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Which again, purity, we have Shauna who was wearing white in the dream sequence. Like white is often associated with being pure, innocent, if you will. So
I mean, I do think there's a world where if we're setting up what's happening, just to theorize for a moment, is Taissa seeing, um, fox or coyote or whatever with a rabbit in its mouth. I do, and then Van being, in danger but not the victim. I do, and then Taissa thinking about in the in the previous episodes about like, isn't that really like she the leader? I do feel like a scenario where it's like Shauna either like is supposed to be killed or is being like given the leadership role. Taissa thinking like we have to actually kill Shauna, and Van sort of in line with what happened before, we're like, protecting that from happening, and obviously she's not going to die, but like that being sort of the power struggle play feels to me maybe what some of this is representing, but
mhm.
I don't know. Yeah.
Especially considering Van is constantly close to death, close to danger. Taissa feels dangerous. Maybe not Taissa, but other
I
Taissa, her alter
I
ego, is incredibly dangerous.
I
So
completely agree. So,
we could
yeah.
look at Taissa as the coyote, fox, wolf, whatever, because we've seen that imagery around her a lot.
Yeah.
And is Van the rabbit? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I
Um,
think Shauna as the rabbit, but
Shauna could be the rabbit too, again, because Shauna with all the rabbit figurines and everything makes sense. So
yeah.
it's so fascinating, and I think it is incredibly interesting that Van is not the one bought in, and it's Taissa or
Yeah.
Taissa's altar, depending on how you want to look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
This whole thing was very interesting, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. I was really happy, Grace, to get confirmation immediately the next episode of Van's cancer being in remission. I'm happy they didn't make us wait on that because I feel like most people probably picked up on what they were putting down there.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Ben and Mari, who I feel like is kind of like the last big
Yeah.
thing this episode. Can I just say Mari tries to use bear spray on Coach Ben to leave. And
Yeah, like pepper spray in his eyes kind of thing.
but that's wrong. I think that why that didn't work, obviously, Jess. I mean, Coach Ben isn't really a bear. He's probably more like an otter or like something else. So she should
Well,
use otter spray or something like that.
right. I
Do you get what
mean,
I'm saying?
yes, I do. Also, okay, you mentioned the the no-eyed man thing and also the llama talking was kind of
Uh-huh.
like didn't really work for you. I will say the Ben and Mari stuff like didn't really work for me.
Oh,
It
interesting.
and here's why, okay? Mari first her method to try to escape from being a hostage is to flirt with Ben and hit
Yes.
on him and um I'm sorry. These girls have been living together for a year.
Mhm.
Okay. Nat knows Ben is gay, hasn't said anything.
Good for Nat. Nat's not gonna
Great for Nat. Love
don't
that.
out anybody. Yeah.
Misty also knows. And you are telling me that she
Mm.
has not told anybody in these 12 months when she is desperate to get people to like her. I don't buy that. But on top of that, that wasn't really even the part that didn't work for me, Grace.
More like Misty Quig ally. Is that good?
Incredible.
Thank you.
Incredible. 10 out of
Thanks.
10.
Thank you.
Um The part that didn't really work for me was actually the bear spray part. It was like tried to be too funny, I think. And I think that's where I was like, "Oh, all right. Like I get it, you know. Like it's fine." But what did you make of the big bullet points in my opinion of the Ben and Mari of it all was when they're talking and Ben is like, "I was a normal guy. I swear I was a
Uh-huh.
normal guy. Is
Uh-huh.
any of this real?" And then he hears the loud screaming and we see Mari. I think it's questionable as to whether or not Mari actually hears it, because she then tells a story about her cousin who died as a child from cancer,
Mhm.
and how she thinks maybe there are two versions of reality. I thought maybe she was hinting that, oh, he's hearing things.
Oh, um, well, I mean, I think certainly there's something to like, and I think that we could get this as like in terms of like we've talked about like rebirth and reincarnation, but like this way in which like are you closer to something else? Like the closer you are to death, the closer you are to like the other side of that. I mean, the screaming does not feel so far off from Van being Haben guy in terms of like alternate timeline stuff of like is that what you are is the
Yeah.
screams are hearing their own screams like that to me.
Well, and they hear it. The group of girls, when they go out to hunt down Coach
Mhm.
Ben, they hear it just outside the tunnel as well. So it's not. Again, this was just a tiny thing I noticed, because it was after that Mari was like really hell bent on getting out of there, and in my head I thought, oh, he's like hearing things, and she's like, this guy's losing his mind, like he's talking to people that aren't there the day before. So
Mhm.
maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I just was curious as to like what purpose did that entire scene, those both of them telling those stories,
Mhm.
what purpose did that serve?
Yeah, I mean, I think the line, like, I think there are two versions of reality. I don't think it's like, we shouldn't, I think, immediately like dismiss it just because it's like Mari saying it. I think it's certainly like worth jotting down because it's a thing that gets said on the show. And I think almost everything that's in
Mhm.
here is purposeful. Like, it could just be like, I mean, the thing there is it could serve the purpose of it will explain what Mari does in the future. Like we'll get a moment later where you're like, oh, she's not going along with this thing because she has a belief system that we know because she talked with Ben. Like that's the extent it could be important, or it's important because like it fuels the explanation for what's actually happening on the show.
Mhm.
So I think it's worth noting. I don't really know, and I
Yeah.
didn't catch that Mari didn't hear the screams, but I would have to go back and
I
rewatch it
think
to
her
really confirm.
face,
But
it's a question. I don't think it's obvious one way or the other. To
mm,
me, it felt ambiguous.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, this entire thing is so interesting, because where we leave the 90s storyline is Ben has saved the three that were seemingly under some kind of poisonous gas situation in
yeah.
Akila, Shauna, and Van. But the other girls have caught up to them, and Nat is holding him at gunpoint, and it seems like they are going to be taking him hostage back at their camp.
Yeah. Um, okay. Things for next week. Do you have any? Is there something you want to hone in on for next week in terms of a thing you would like more information on by the end of next week's episode?
I think I would really, really like to. I'm going to go present day storyline this time. I would really like to know what the hell is going on with the No-Eyed Man. I don't know that we're
Mm.
going to have to wait the entire season to get answers on that. I'd like to know more next episode.
I think that's fair. I think we got a big chunk of it that once you start. I mean, this is a classic horror movie thing that once you start seeing the thing, the less scary it becomes, and the more you actually probably want to give us like explanation. So I think the idea of we now know that potentially there was something to do with this no-eyed man from a ice cream commercial. They went to the ice cream shop and saw a fox or a coyote, and more information on that would be great. I don't think we can go. How many episodes in the season? There's 8 or 10 or 8. I'd have to look this up. I don't think we can go that much further without having Hillary Swank on the show. So 10 episodes a season. Next week is a little before halfway. I would like to see Hillary Swank on my television screen, I think.
Same.
So yeah, that's
Maybe
my.
a Joel McHale sighting would be nice.
I really have no idea where Joel McHale is fitting into this show. Do you have from everything we've seen so far?
My only assumption is that he is a present day character, and I'm gonna just throw it out there. I think he's associated with Lottie in some way, shape, or
Oh,
form.
I would have
I don't
I
know.
would have put him with Walter probably, but
That's a fun pairing. I'd love to see.
they
Yeah.
just that feels like the most like there's more obviously over there, and it feels like you could have some version of Joel McHale's character, in that world more than I see him. The other place, I guess, is as I said, Jeff, business related stuff. He feels like he's a businessman as well.
Yeah, could be a businessman.
All right. Well, I think that's Yellowjackets episode 3. We'll be back next week with episode 4. Very excited for that. Anything else, Jess, you want to promote?
No, I mean, you can find me the usual places at the Jess Sterling. Go check out Shit 90 Shows Taught Me, as well as Talking Shit and Look for the Light. This was a great episode. I'm loving this season, and I cannot wait to see what's next.
Yeah, same. Make sure you check out my coverage of Yellowjackets over on Parade and everything else we're doing here on We Know Scripted TV. I think that's it for this week. We will be back next week with another recap of Yellowjackets season 3. Until then, a licky boom boom down.